Hey, welcome back, Yvonne Wakefield YouTube channel. And tonight, as usual, we have Teddy Bear and Zachary. So I just got back from a big trip to Mendocino, California, where I had a retrospective of my student work at the Mendocino Art Center. Teddy stayed with his grandmama, and Zachary went with me, and we got to run on the beach every day. It was good to be back in Mendocino, maritime air, where I picked up my usual respiratory situations. So tonight we're going back, reading Babe in the Woods. The first book, as you know, is about the cabin I built when I was 18. This continues into my 20s, and this takes you up to now. So last week I read, and none of these chapters are numbered, they're just titled. It was called Freedom, and it was about, if you remember, a visit with some neighbors down the mountain and a garden that they did not put in, and how you can live a lot more fuller life with less. So tonight, it's called Hidden Spaces. And when I'm up at the cabin, I'm just there, and there's like no, especially then, there was no cell phone or anything like that. And it was just books, my imagination, and my observational skills. So when I mentioned Leo and Harriet, those are the neighbors down below me, and I actually sold them 40 of my acres. I was in my mid-20s when I sold half my property to Leo and Harriet. Besides helping to cover bills, that transaction enabled me to buy some property and move to Port Townsend, Washington, where real estate was more affordable than in Mendocino, California. Mendocino is where I was being a student, which enabled me to have the summers to be up at the cabin. To move to Port Townsend, Washington, where real estate was more affordable than Mendocino, California. The Dalles, Oregon, was a bit over the halfway mark in this 500-mile trip between my new maritime Puget Sound residence and the cabin. When possible, I stayed at a motel in the Dalles so I could wake at 4 a.m. to drive through the columnar basalt Columbia Gorge as the moon set and the sun rose. On one of these early trips, a paying deadline had me punching out of Port Townsend at an hour that normally found me checked into a room in the Dalles. By the time I arrived at this midpoint, it was well after midnight. The truck needed gassing, the dogs needed stretching, and a 24-hour Safeway meant I could restock the cooler there instead of at Chester's Market, which would not be open until I drove through John Day at 5 a.m. This is how I met the Mexican, who was really a Native American, who told me, "You talk like an Indian." And these come from real journal entries I kept in 8.5 by 11-inch spiral bound notebooks. So this is from that journal entry. The dogs sniff about a grassy curbside as I pack a cooler with fresh ice and groceries. In the few minutes it takes to arrange the Coleman, they vanish somewhere between the parking lot and street. "Arthur, Mary Alice, Arthur." My plaintive pitch rising along with my fear that a rat terrier named Arthur and Mary Alice, a miniature black poodle, have run away or have been run over. At the height of my dismay or the beginning of a full-fledged hunt on foot, I find both dogs sitting on a curb alongside a leathery, sienna-faced man. I approach tentatively, anxious to be reunited with my recreant mutts, while the man's bobbing head and bloodshot eyes level on my knees. His sweat and work-stained jeans and cotton shirt aired a commingling of bodily fluids. "I like animals," he said, his words slurred by old alcohol fumes. This was one drunk Mexican, I presumed, or as I demand, "Come on, guys, Mary Alice, Arthur, here," but neither dog budged. "Animals are free spirits," the man says crisply. Maybe he wasn't so drunk after all. "I used to be like them." The man pets Arthur with a hand brown as the dog's muzzle, then affectionately chucks him under the chin. "Now my spirit is no longer free," he adds, pulling Mary Alice to his side and looking back down at the gutter. I was calculating how to grab my dogs and run when the man looked up straight straight into my eyes as he clearly saw every nook and cranny of my being when it was still being developed in the womb and later maturing a womb of its own. Those eyes glowed like the neon Safeway sign above him, advertising he had been drunk for some time, or he had fried his eyeballs, seeing through bone and marrow. Too many people tell me I can't be an animal with a free spirit, he says. I merely nod in agreement and command, come on, guys. Still, neither dogs obey. Maybe if I hand him some money, it would distract him enough that I could yank the dogs by their collar and they would follow me across the parking lot to the safety of the truck cab. Then I remembered what my brother told me about helping people down on their luck. I never give them money. They just use it to buy whatever got them into trouble in the first place. I give them food instead, like sardines, because they can be packed around and don't need a can opener, he once advised. This man kind of reminded me of my brother at points in his own life when he was down on a luck he would never find. I wanted to treat this stranger like a brother of sorts and buy him a deli sandwich. But I could not leave him alone with my dogs to re-enter Safeway, where the produce was more squarely housed than many of those who picked the pears, peaches, apples, strawberries, and cherries wrapped in sterilized bins. Instead, I back away, keeping my sights on the dogs, open the truck hatch, and return with a bag of Keebler's pecan sandies and place it before the man's dusty booted feet. It was the most practical food I could offer, as I imagined he was a picker who followed the fruit, sleeping in his vehicle, lacking the means of food preparation or preservation, a lifestyle I knew from a more privileged station. But the times I'd slept in the back of my truck were only out of necessity in brief, transient moments, as my livelihood wasn't dependent upon ripeness pulled and plucked off brushes and branches and enduring conditions as a migrant laborer. I used to have the spirit of an animal, but too many people said I couldn't, the man repeated, ignoring the Keeblers. Then you listen to too many people. Follow your heart, I said, sitting down on the curb beside Mary Alice, but far to the right of the man. Now you're talking Indian talk, he said. You are an Indian? Warm Springs, he replies, and I did not know if this was a tribe or the name of a resort. Animals are free spirit, the man mumbles again, a lapse enabling me to grab the dogs by their scruff. He eyes me like an impounded pup as I jog to the truck, and I wanted nothing more than to adopt him or to open his cage. Instead, I turn my back and drive away, alternating cassette tapes between Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and Chris Williams' song, Wild Things. By the time we turn off at Celilo to head east, Arthur and Mary Alice, curled nose to tail on a seat, are as dead asleep as the spirit in a stretch of the Columbia River, once free. By sunrise, I am road-weary and unpacking groceries at the cabin in the company of aggravation. 3 weeks before, I strategically laid out taro liquid baits, but they had not slowed the ant brigade marching to Pretoria, hither and fro. In loosely strung pearl formation, these blackballers were boring the cabin to powder. Making matters worse, I couldn't get out of my head what that man on the curb said. Animals are free spirits, as I purposely squished ants underfoot. I didn't give a fig about their spirits. My move to Port Townsend ended a seasonal job that provided the luxury of 3 summer months at the cabin. It also altered my goal of reading 26 books over a summer. Now I could only go to the cabin between freelance work and read at most 2 books a stay. At the cabin, books had become the people not in my life. And unlike people, I could shut up a book when I was tired of listening. Over the years, I've built up a diverse log cabin library of authors I want to hear again and again. This library is divided into 3 parts, located on 2 floors. In the loft, a full set of the 1958 Encyclopedia Americana is alphabetically arranged on a long, rough plank bookshelf. I purchased newer sets before, which I eventually gave away or sold every time I moved. But I kept the older set, bought for $12 at a garage sale, to remind me of shifted facts, maps, population censuses. I still use these. To this day, I still use those encyclopedias. On the shelf below the encyclopedias, art books and art magazines packed tight as a pack of chewing gum are regularly referenced for ageless theory and techniques. Besides them are philosophical books and practical back-to-the-land guides. To the right is a full set of numerically ordered great books with gold embossed covers in a custom-made bookshelf written by authors who would not see the light of traditional politically correct publishing today. Excuse me, I gotta take a little break there for my throat. Actually, I still read those great books when I go there, and I went in this new woke society, and they would never be published today. On the main floor, cobbled shelving holds 4 levels of selected novels, short story and poetry anthologies, slim volumes signed by the poet, clunky history and science texts, my white plastic-bound First Communion Missal, and a couple of Charlie Brown comic paperbacks saved from Girl Scout summer camp. The south log wall features a single board shelf strung by 2 sisal rope strands above a dresser nearly as long and balances a collection of natural history. This is where I pried out Darwin that morning after a long drive, punctuated by a curbside visit. The origin of species with mouth-chewed corners is marked by a brittle brown pine needle signaling pages ahead devoted to ants commonly found in England. Rereading this section, I learned the carpenter ants at the cabin share the evolutionary dictates of their European cousins, Sanguini and Rufiensis. Sanguini is a slave maker ant found in England. When you find an ant in England, don't you want to say you found an aunt? Anyway, found in England, Scotland, and certain Welsh borders. They nest in dead wood and raid other ant nests, taking the pupae and larvae back to their colony and raising slave ants to help them forage, rear their own, and even assist in slave raids. Rufiensis, also a slave-making ant, is a native to Europe. A freshly mated female Rufiensis must, in order to survive, take over another ant colony, kill the queen, and be accepted by the host workers. In the United States, this undertaking shares parallels with an elected official. One of these comes to mind. Ronald Reagan, a nice enough guy to your face, acted his way first into the role of California's governor, and later would burrow even more deeply into a Washington colony of divisive workers. During his 1981 and 1989 reign, the 40th president of the United States would opine, if you've looked at 100,000 acres so of trees, you know a tree is a tree. How many more do you need to look at? Unquote. Later, his statement would be reconstructed by California's incumbent, Pat Brown, as, you've seen one redwood, you've seen them all. You've seen one, and you gotta kill them all, I sing stamping about the porch as I recall Reagan's recanonized observation. Reading Darwin could be taxing, and killing ants was relaxing. I dance until it looks like a jar of beluga caviar dribbled across the flooring. If there was really a heaven, then Lawrence Welk was looking down, baton in hand, directing my 2/4 tom, a 1 and a 2. Probably a lot of you listening to this have never heard of Ronald Reagan or Lawrence Welk. Living alone with no telephonic or electronic form of communications means that I spend all my time on hold, sensing, then thinking about what I'm sensing. A few days after the pestilence Compotus modoc entered my Lexon, I hike to the Red Rocks and sit under a juniper tree on a knoll with a 360-degree view. No book, no sketchbook, or even a water canteen for distraction. Only bird twitter scatters pine-scented zephyrs until, out of the blue, a coyote crashes my reverie. It crested the butte and stopped not 10 feet away. Only our nostrils flared as we sniffed out each other, me in tree shade, the coyote in full-bore sun. Since my wristwatch was in the cabin, I measured time by the juniper shadow lengthening in directions of the keen-eyed animal. By the time that shadow touched the coyote's toes, we could clearly see we were flesh and bone, mined from the same mother lode. And if we didn't mess with each other, there was nothing to be afraid of. "Hi, little baby," I said in a kind of sing-song way. As the coyote had broken my contemplation, my words had disturbed his. He'd probably never been called a baby before, felt perturbed, and shot me an emasculated look. All this time, I was assuming it was a male, and walked right past in a soft, ranting huff. With the coyote gone, the of grasshoppers and the beep, cheep, cheep, beep, cheep of juncos and magpies, operatic discord accompanies the creek below. Insect, avian, and atmospheric refrain resonate into a not measured in paces, notes, or times. This gossamer opera contained a literal register of that morning's sporadic reading, which included Pilgrim at Tigger Creek. Unlike most volumes in my library picked up at two-bit sales, it is custom blue, leather-bound hardback and purchased at auction. That morning I was reading what the book's author, Annie Dillard, wrote about looking into a tree, that it was like solving a child's puzzle. Hidden in the branches is a book, a boy, a bucket, and other objects. Sitting under that juniper's moss-patched branches, I find myself a girl woman shooting the breeze. I could sit here until summer rolled through winter and always win the prize of finding myself between its spaces. It is off the mountain and lacking the lacing of barky limbs that I lose my footing in landscapes branching out of glass, metal, electricity, and discharging human intersections. I stayed until all I could see was the dark that I would stumble through should I fail to follow the primal beacon within. Okay, well, that is actually the part one of this book. Next time we'll be reading part two, later entries. So things about status quo around here. Oregon is burning up. I was actually going to go to the cabin Friday, but I found out today the main road I take has got fires on all sides, so we'll see. So if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's free. The books are available wherever books are sold. And Kate Webster narrates these books professionally on audiobooks. So we hope you enjoyed it. It's summer. I don't know what time you're going to see this, YouTube. And as always, stay hydrated, boys. You stay hydrated. You can't have that. You can lick the ice. You can lick the ice. You can't have that. That's enough for boys. Bye-bye. Look, don't they look posed? Their feet. Teddy Bear, you're a movie star.